Or, if you end up using any of this stuff and you've got feedback or questions, I try to make myself as available as possible.
You want to keep that one for yourself? Okay.
Thank you so much.
So you're welcome.
Oh yeah? We're starting? All right. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here. I would like just to start out by giving my gratitude to you guys for coming out, simply because it's not for me so much, but I'm always really humbled when I get a group of people who are really interested in learning more about health and how to live a healthy lifestyle. And so there's so many kind of distractions in this world and other things that pull us in different directions, and I'm just always kind of humbled and inspired when there's a group of people come together who want to hear, some hippie talk about salt. So here we go. My name is Shane Hennessy. I've been in this kind of health food industry for quite a while, about 15 years, and in the last 10 years I've been down in Florida working in different health food stores. And about 3 years ago I came across this product line, which is Evolution Salt, which is a Himalayan salt products. And I started working very closely with them, and for the last few years I have worked as an educator and a trainer and so forth with this company to help people to get a better understanding of salt. So there's a great misunderstanding, which is that salt is bad for us. And frankly, next to water, salt is probably the most important thing you're going to put in your body every day. The reason that there's a bit of a misunderstanding has to do with what we know as table salt. And table salt is really industrialized salt, but with a different name or a different label. So you can go and you can buy a pound of this salt, and you get it for about 99 cents. But that salt is really not what our body is looking for. This salt has been heated up at 1200 degrees. Now, the sodium chloride bond has been broken, and this is really now a foreign substance to our bodies. We have a hard time absorbing it, even harder time getting rid of it. And that's where it wreaks havoc with the things that it's meant to maintain, like blood pressure and water retention. Salt maintains blood pressure in our bodies. That's what it does. But we take in so much of this form of salt that our body doesn't know what to do with, and it builds up and builds up over time, yet our body isn't processing it properly, so we keep craving salt and wanting more salt. In the meantime, all this buildup of this salt in our bodies that we can't get rid of starts to throw the blood pressure off, or it starts to, we start to retain water and so forth. So the first part of understanding this is really understanding the difference in salts. And there's a fantastic book. I brought this in just as a kind of a reference for you guys if you want to follow up with this. It's called Water and Salt, The Essence of Life. And the authors are Barbara Hendel and Peter Ferrier. This is a really great book, goes into great detail about water and salt, but the reason I brought it in, I wanted you guys to be able to see this image. I'm just going to pass it around so you guys can check it out. But they show the magnifications of the different salts. And so you can see in the imagery, table salt, which again has been heated up at this enormous temperature, has these isolated molecules that our body doesn't really know how to process and how to get rid of. Sea salt, because it's coming from polluted ocean, has to be refined and treated and so forth to make sure that it's safe for us. So in order to get a raw salt, you're looking at Himalayan salt. And Himalayan salt, not only is it raw, it comes right out of the Himalayan mountains this way, but it's actually got 84 trace minerals in it. And that's huge. I mean, that's huge because we are depleted in trace minerals. It used to be that the trace minerals were in the food, because the food would get the minerals from the soil. But our soil is depleted of these trace minerals, and therefore the food is depleted, and so as a result we are depleted of trace minerals. With the Himalayan salt, not only is it a form of salt that our body can recognize and know what to do with, but it also has with it these 84 trace minerals. When you're talking salt, you don't just want to think about sodium chloride. Salt, in its true sense, is really a combination of minerals that work together synergistically in our bodies. we think of salt, we think of it in a shaker kind of like this as a spice, and we're going to put this on our avocados and so forth, and it's good that way. However, the goal of my lecture tonight is to get people to think not just about salt as a spice, but as salt as more of as a supplement. And the way that you would look at it that way, you have this kind of this jar, and inside the jar you got these salt crystals in here. And the way that you would go about this is you take all the salt crystals out of the bag and you put them back into the jar. And then you fill this jar up with water, and you want to fill it up about 3/4 of the way or so that it's manageable. And you put your lid back on and you put it on the counter and you just let it sit overnight. And of course the salt is going to dissolve in there, but it stops dissolving, it saturates once it reaches 26% solution. And the protocol with this, what you're doing is taking 1 teaspoon of this solution in a full glass of water first thing every morning. Now, as a mineral supplement, this is pretty much bar none. I mean, you're going to be hard pressed to find a trace mineral supplement that can boast 84 trace minerals, especially in their raw, natural, most bioavailable form. But probably more importantly for a lot of people, in particular those of us who are wrestling with our relationship with salt, this gives us a measurable amount on a daily consistent basis of the form of salt we need. Now, you don't have to do a teaspoon. You can do a 1/2 teaspoon or a 1/4 of a teaspoon, or even just a drop if you're really scared of salt. I understand we've been kind of inundated with this idea that salt is bad for us. However, when you start to use this, you're going to notice very quickly the benefits. The first thing that people start to notice when they use this is energy. Salt is the conductor, it's the conduit that the electric energy flows through in our bodies. So it's cell-to-cell communication, it's energy on a cellular level. People who have kind of cut back a lot on salt and have depleted their bodies of salt, not only have they increased their odds for heart attack and stroke and coronary disease, but they also are walking around low energy, dehydrated, and when they start to use this, they're going to hydrate their body on a cellular level, and they're going to start to energize their body. Another kind of benefit of Himalayan salt is the crystal. This salt was trapped. It used to be sea salt, and as the Himalayan mountains formed, it trapped the salt in there, and the amazing pressure involved actually crystallized the salt. Kind of like a piece of coal will turn into a diamond if you crush it hard enough. So this is a crystal salt, and one of the benefits of a crystal salt is it actually has the same resonant frequency as our blood, 7.14 and a whole host of other numbers. So everything has a certain vibration that it, frequency that it vibrates at. And it just so happens that the Himalayan salt has the same frequency that we do. And when you use this on a regular basis, you're actually allowing your body to kind of hold on to that frequency. We're constantly bombarded with dissonant frequencies from all the electromagnetic pollution. So actually using Himalayan salt on a regular basis is one way to protect yourself, to ground yourself, and to maintain your own frequency. But that's kind of, one of the additional benefits, you might say. The people who benefit from this the most are those who need the trace minerals. And a lot of times people will find, like, for example, if you're going to bed at night and you start cramping up in your legs or in your feet, that's very oftentimes the trace mineral deficiency. And when you start using the Soleil solution, that goes away pretty quickly. Also, sometimes people will find that when they start using this, they're not so acidic anymore. The minerals in the salt actually help to alkaline the body. Also helps a little bit with regularity, gets things moving. We should all start our day with a glass of water. Kind of wakes things up, gets things moving, hydrates the body. When you take that glass of water and you put your spoonful of the Soleil solution in there, now you're hydrating your body far greater. I mean, it's on a cellular level now. You are alkaline in your body. You're detoxing your body of heavy metals. You're kind of jump starting that peristalsis, getting things moving, and the benefits go kind of beyond. You're regulating the blood pressure in your body. You're kind of promoting homeostasis. You're allowing your nutrients to be absorbed better in the intestinal tract. So when you get into this and you start to understand the benefits, it goes on and on and on and on. And there's a whole lot of other stuff that I'd like to touch on with the salt, but I do start with this and usually end with it because I believe that using this solution is is probably one of the best things that just about everybody can do. My daughter's 5 years old. She's been taking this since she was 2. I give her a quarter of a teaspoon in her juice in the morning. I have 3 cats, and I give them about a quarter of a teaspoon in their wet food as well. I mix it up in there. These minerals in the salt is actually good for everybody. As you're using this, eventually the water level goes down. A few weeks into it, you've taken a spoonful every morning, so you just fill it back up again, give it overnight again, and in the morning again you'll still see these crystals in there. It's about a 3-month supply until the salt dissolves completely. And once it dissolves completely, then you can just get a refill this way and start it all over again. And also I'll mention that this is a really nice glass jar. But if you have a really nice glass jar at home already, you can just get the refill and kind of start it that way. And the only thing you want to make sure of is that you don't use a mason jar or anything with metal, because the metal is going to rust with the salt over time, and it's also going to interfere with that resonant frequency, that vibrational benefit that the salt has. Well, moving along then from there, and again I will mention that it's okay to use the Himalayan salt in place of a table salt, and that's really typically a good place for people to start the adventure of moving into Himalayan salt. But if you're somebody who's kind of on a salt restricted diet and you're really kind of afraid to use salt or don't want to use salt, then the way to get into this, to start using this, is this way. And you would want to start with maybe a quarter of a teaspoon and a full glass of water, and just kind of monitor yourself that way, and work with your doctor if you want to get off of your blood pressure medications, because there's no reason why you should have to be on a blood pressure medication. Salt regulates blood pressure. And once you can understand the difference in salt and regulate your intake of salt with water, mind you, because the kidneys use water to flush the excess salt. So no matter what kind of salt you're using, you can still get into trouble with it. If you just take this salt home and you say, I learned that Himalayan salt lowers blood pressure, so you go to town with it, no, that's not going to work. Okay? Himalayan salt does not lower blood pressure. It balances blood pressure. If your blood pressure is low, it's going to bring it nice and where it should be. If it's too high, it's going to bring it back down. So it's important to understand that that's how salt works in our bodies. It's not like a magic thing that you can start taking and not have to worry about it. It's understanding the relationship that we have with salt and water, and getting the measured amount of those two things to start your day, set that kind of foundation. Then you can really start to have the healthy lifestyle that you're looking for. Now, that's ingesting the salt. What about soaking in the salt? A lot of folks have the experience of soaking in an Epsom salt, which is very drying to the skin. It does have a lot of magnesium in it, so it has that kind of relaxation effect, which is nice. You get that effect also with the Himalayan salt, but you get some additional benefit. First and foremost, the 84 trace minerals in this salt are going to be absorbed into the skin on a cellular level, so it actually hydrates your skin. You don't want to rinse off afterwards. And the salt, of course, is naturally antibacterial and antifungal, so it's really good for like a toe fungus or the bacteria on the feet that cause them to stink. I like to do a foot soak myself. You can do a whole, bath with it as well. You take about a half a cup in the bath, and you want to soak in there for about 15 or 20 minutes. And it's a really good time. It's a nice way to detox and a nice kind of enjoyable experience. When you do in the foot, I do about a quarter of a cup and enough water to get my feet into. And I just use a little Tupperware thing, Again, about 15 or 20 minutes is a good way to go. The reason that I do this once a week is because as a maintenance for detoxification, this is a really smart thing to do. What happens is, when you soak in Himalayan salt, you're actually absorbing those 84 trace minerals, and a fantastic thing occurs when you do that. You detox. You detox heavy metals. A lot of people are familiar with the concept of a foot ionization, where you got your foot in there and it's generating the negative ions in the water, and this pulls all this toxic junk, all these heavy metals out. You got discoloration afterwards. It's an interesting experience, no doubt. However, if you don't remineralize after you've done that ionization, then you're leaving yourself very open, very vulnerable to reabsorbing all those heavy metals again. Now, the way I try to explain this so people can understand, say you're getting into your bathtub and you've got the city water, the municipal water loves to put in like fluoride and chlorine and all these other things in our water. Well, unfortunately, the receptor sites in our bodies grab them. They're looking for them. They're not quite looking for them in that form. They're looking for them as a trace mineral. But as a heavy metal in our water, they're very similar. And so we absorb these things and bring them in our bodies. And unfortunately, we can't really process them or get rid of them, and over time builds up in our body and has a toxic effect. Now, if you take some Himalayan salt and you throw that in your bathtub or in your foot soak, however you want to do it, what happens is there's chlorine in here, there's fluoride in here, but they're in the natural form that's in our body when we're born as a trace mineral. And so the receptor sites in our bodies know the difference. And they go, ooh, cool, fluoride, chlorine, I'll take it. Wait, there's the right form. And they're going to grab the right form as a trace mineral, and in the process, kick out the wrong form to make room. So we're literally absorbing trace minerals and detoxing heavy metals in the same breath. Now, there are 84 trace minerals in the Himalayan salt. Anybody want to take a guess at how many heavy metals we're detoxing when we soak in this? 84. For every trace mineral, there's a heavy metal equivalent. And for one of the, it's interesting, but we have a real kind of an epidemic with heavy metal toxicity in our society. And there's a lot of people blaming different things and blaming this and aluminum in the deodorants and you name it. But what it really comes down to is, why are we absorbing these things? Why does our body absorb these heavy metals? And the reason is because we are so deficient in trace minerals. If we had the trace minerals there, our body would not be searching for these things. So detoxification is incredibly important, but remineralization is equally as important. And when you're soaking in the Himalayan salt, you're actually doing both. However, the best way to go about this is to do the ionization, to do like the foot bath ionization, to really, this gets really deep into pulling the junk out, and then follow it up with the remineralization and the soaking in the salt. And again, about 1/4 cup in enough water to get your feet into for 15 or 20 minutes is a really good therapy. I do this once a week. It's also a good idea if you're ever going to do kind of a detox program or a cleanse where you're doing for 2 weeks, maybe you're taking some pills in the morning and some herbs at night, that kind of a thing. A lot of times when people get into this, they're 3 days in or so and they start to get this nasty headache and they feel tired and fatigued, and what's happening is they're getting this die-off effect. All the toxins in their body are dying off, but they have no way out. And so when you do a soak in conjunction with one of these cleanses and these detoxes, it gives your body a really good opportunity to safely get rid of these toxins without you having to feel it so much. So it's more likely you're going to stick with that cleanse and you're going to get a better detox out of it in the end. Should I jump to the lamps? Let me jump to the lamps. I know you guys want to hear about the lamps. So these, of course, are made with Himalayan salt. And the way they work, you have a little bulb. I'll just kind of show you guys if you're not familiar. So this is drilled out. There's a hole here in the center of this. And the bulb, it's a 15-watt bulb, just slides up in there like that. And that allows it to light up. And they look very pretty. However, they have some additional benefit, of course. And what happens is the salt is what's called hygroscopic, means it's bringing in moisture all the time from the air. And the heat from that bulb, again, it's a 15-watt bulb. And I really want to stress that, because a lot of times people will get one of these lamps and they'll bring them home and they'll have them on for a little while, and then the bulb will go out. And then they'll run to Walmart or wherever to find one that looks the same. But they look like the 4-watt nightlight bulbs that they have there. And a 4-watt nightlight bulb is not going to heat this lamp up. Now, the way they work, the moisture is pulled in from the air with the salt, and then the heat from the light bulb evaporates that moisture back out. That process is how they generate negative ions. So they have to be kind of heating up and on to be working. And that's a crucial point for that. And that's why I stress the 15 watts. The negative ions are good for 2 things. The first thing is that they're attaching themselves, the negative ions, to dust and pollen and mold and fungus and odors. And they literally drop these things to the floor, so we sweep them up later. but it actually cleans the air. And people who have allergies and asthma and different respiratory issues, when they put one of these lamps in their room, actually helps them with that. I've also heard quite often from wives that their husbands stop snoring when they put one in the room. I don't know why the husband never tells me that the wife stops snoring. It just never seems to work that way. It's always the other way around. Now, the other benefit of negative ions is that they offset the positive ions from the electromagnetic frequencies coming from the cell phones, the computers, the TVs, the microwaves, the refrigerators, the fluorescent lights, the smart meters, kind of everything. You know, it's an interesting side story, I suppose, but it's very relevant. Since the early 70s, scientists have been studying the effects of negative ions. And since the early 70s, we've known that every living thing does much better in an environment rich in negative ions. Plants grow better. Animals don't fight as much. And people don't fight as much. We're just naturally happier in this environment. Ideally, we want 1,200 to 1,500 negative ions per square cubic centimeter, and that's what you'll get if you go out on the beach or out in the country, or there's a nice thunderstorm rolling in, you know, that kind of thing. But in our homes and our workplaces, because we as a society have created all of these technologies that, you know, produce electromagnetic frequencies in the positive ions, we're lucky if we're at a couple of hundred negative ions per square cubic centimeter in our homes. Now, this is becoming a real issue as we start to realize the effects that the positive ions have on us. These positive ions, the ones associated with the electromagnetic frequencies, actually interfere with cell-to-cell communication in our bodies. And that's been linked to emotional and cognitive instabilities. Like can't focus, can't concentrate. Actually, anxiety and depression fall in there as well. People who are subjected to environments full of these positive ions and the EMFs all the time are much more likely to start to exhibit these symptoms. Now, when you put a lamp in a room, this lamp actually increases the negative ions in a typical 11 by 11 sized room by 300%. So it's very significant. And the more negative ions that we can put in our environment, the better we're going to be. The happier we're going to feel. Just in general, it's going to clean the environment around us, not just of the dust and the pollen and the mold and such, but of what we've come to know as electromagnetic smog. And so a lot of people these days are kind of looking into this, questioning this, and wondering how to protect themselves. I mentioned earlier the resonant frequency of this salt actually matches our own. And so when you're using this internally on a regular basis, actually allows us to hold on to that frequency better. The lamps, magically, I don't know, God bless, I don't know how the salt does this, but externally in the shape of a lamp, it does the same thing. It's protecting us from these positive ions and these EMFs, allowing us to maintain our own frequency. So, you know, this was about 2 years after working with the salt that I kind of had this epiphany, and I went, oh my gosh, somehow the salt is protecting us from what may be one of the most dangerous environmental toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis. And for some miraculous reason, the salt is able to protect us from that internally and externally. Kind of a cool thing. And of course there's a lot of different shapes that you can see and sizes, you know, with the lamp. And yes, of course, the bigger the lamp, the more negative ions it generates. Actually, the more surface area a lamp has, the more negative ions it generates. So a piece like this one, for example, it has the bowl with all the loose chunks in there. You've got a lot of surface area there. You've got the outside, the inside, and all those loose pieces. So for its size, this one generates almost as many negative ions as this one will. So there's a lot of benefit that way. And of course, this one here, it's got the hole is drilled all the way through, and there's just a little dish you can kind of see here. There's some oil in there. I don't want to spill it, but it's for your essential oils, so it works as aromatherapy, as a diffuser lamp. It heats up in there that way. So a few different styles that, and you know, there's no, aside from the surface area, there's no more benefit from one lamp than the other, but these lamps will last a lifetime. So it's a good idea to get one that you want to spend some time looking at, because, you know, they never are really going to go away. Now, the one thing I'll mention is that if you are going to have it turned off for a long time and you're going to go away or whatever, it's a good idea to put a little plastic over it to protect it from moisture and humidity, because remember, that's how these work, is they're pulling in moisture and humidity from the air and then re-evaporating it back out again. But if they're not heating up, then they're only doing the first half. And if they keep doing the first half too long, eventually they start to drip a little bit of water there. So you want to make sure that it's always on, or if it's going to be off for, you know, a week or more, then you'll want to just take, like I say, a little plastic bag and kind of put it over it to protect it from the moisture and the humidity. But the best way to do it is just to leave them on all the time. And that way they're always working and you don't have to worry about it. And these little light bulbs, they, you know, sometimes they'll only last a few weeks, sometimes they'll last almost a year. But I have noticed that if you turn them on and off a lot, then they tend to go out a little quicker. So if you just leave the thing on all the time, that's really the best way to deal with them. And you put it where you spend the most time, because that's where you'll get the most benefit from it. You can also, if you want to put one in the bedroom, a lot of times people will mention it's too much light at night to sleep to, which is fine. Sometimes I'll just take a book and kind of like, you know, open it up and put it in front of mine like that to deflect the light away. But if it's still too bright, turn it off at night and then just turn it back on again in the morning. It certainly isn't going to drip on you or anything in one night, and you're still getting the benefit all day long while it's on in your room, even though you're not in there. Now, for those who have kind of a more serious respiratory issues, yes, it's a good idea to put the lamp in your room, but you can go further with the salt as well, and that's where you've got this deal. This is the salt air inhaler. And what it is, it's a ceramic piece that comes filled with the salt already in there. You can kind of hear it in there. And you got the little holes on the bottom, and another piece just like this one that sits kind of dead center in there. That way the salt doesn't just come pouring out of the hole on the top. And what you're doing is you put this in your mouth and you just breathe in through your mouth and out your nose. And what you're doing, you're pulling the air through and past the salt, which is grabbing the microscopic particles of the salt. Naturally, they're antifungal, antibacterial, antimicrobial, and these things get deep down into the lungs and then kind of back up through the nasal passage again. So it's really covering the entire respiratory, and a lot of times, especially with people with allergies, there's an underlying kind of fungus or bacterial infection in the lungs that acts as a trigger for the pollen and the dander and so forth. So when you can use this, it's actually kind of addressing the root cause of the issue. And that natural antifungal, antibacterial aspect of the salt has a chance to really cleanse you out really efficiently. This is a nice thing because it never goes bad. It never runs out. This will last you forever. I mean, sometimes you have to replace the salt in there. There's a little plug in the bottom if you ever need to do that. But I've had mine over 2 years. I've never had to change the salt. The key is keep it in a little plastic bag when you're not using it to protect it from the humidity. If that salt is to clump up in there, you know, then it's not gonna, you're not going to be able to pull the air through it, and you're not going to get the benefit the same way. But I give mine a little shake every time I use it just to make sure that it hasn't clumped up, and also to keep it from clumping up. And again, like I said, just keep it a little plastic when you're not using it. This is safe for anybody. My daughter has been using this since she's 2 years old. You know, my dad uses this at night. He's on COPD, or he's on oxygen. He's got COPD in that, so he's on you know, several different things, but this doesn't get in the way of anything. And it helps a lot. You start with a couple minutes at a time, and you're just normal breathing. And as you start to use this, you start to feel the benefit. It's opening things up, loosening it up, cough some stuff out, and then you start to want to use a little more. You really cannot overdo this therapy. And this is coming from the concept, it's a speleotherapy, and speleo is Greek for cave. Cave therapy is the concept, and the cave are the mines where all the salt is coming out of. When folks who work in these mines get sick, they don't call in. This is the first place they want to go, because breathing in that salt air is so healing for them that way. So this brings the salt rooms and the salt caves and the salt mines to us conveniently wherever we are. And you can work yourself up to 15 or 20 minutes at a time with this, especially first thing in the morning when you wake up and before you go to bed at night. If you're like me and you're driving around all the time, it's a good thing in the car just to kind of have and take your breaths that way. And it really, it's one of these things where pretty much any respiratory issue it's helping with. I've had people ask me about things like lung cancer and that. I can't make any great claims, but what I can say is that when you're dealing with any kind of a situation in your lungs or in your nasal passage or anywhere in your respiratory system, if you can cleanse that naturally with something that's antibacterial and antifungal and antimicrobial, you are really increasing the odds of not having any particular complications with that. And so, also as a preventative, I don't have any asthma or allergies to speak of, but I do use this on a regular basis just to make sure that I'm not going to develop any of those issues. Living in Florida, it's a pretty rough spot as far as the air quality goes, so it's a really good thing to have around. And the only time you would ever need to buy another one of these is if you happen to drop the thing and it broke. Unfortunately, that can happen, as they're ceramic, but we don't use the plastic ones because we don't think that that's really the level that we're looking for with it. You want to keep it clean, so it's a ceramic one. Now, these are kind of the main things to focus on when we're talking about the healing benefits of the Himalayan salt. And just to kind of briefly recap that, we've got the salt as a shaker. We can use it as a spice, but better to get to it where we're using it as a supplement on a measurable amount on a daily basis. We've got, of course, soaking in the salt, which is detoxing, remineralizing, killing the toe fungus and all this kind of wonderful stuff. Got the lamps generating the negative ions, and the salt air inhaler to take it one step further. We also have a whole line of kind of health and beauty stuff. So you get into these soaps, for example. Now these soaps are quite unique. Rather than using water in the manufacturing of these soaps, we're using the dissolved salt, the Soleil solution. So these soaps are infused with the 84 trace minerals. And when you kind of use this soap and you let it lather on, you want to let that lather kind of hang out there for a minute or two and really absorb all those minerals and get the benefit of the soap. People who have kind of sensitive skin, rosaceas and eczema, psoriasis, this type of a thing, do really well with this soap. It's all organic, it's very clean, the essential oils in here are of the highest quality. And this is something where we've got the lavender and the lemongrass, but the unscented one is really the best one when you're dealing with skin sensitivities. That way you're avoiding the possibility of being irritated by the oils. There's also the lotions.
That's the one I use.
What's that, the lotion? Yeah, lemongrass is my favorite one. And the benefit of this lotion, it's a hemp seed based lotion, so it's got all the good omegas, all the good oils in there, but it also has the Soleil solution, the dissolved salt in there. The reason that we put that in here is those 84 trace minerals work tremendously well to hydrate our skin. And so, again, when I was talking about soaking in the salt, we think of salt as kind of drying out to the skin. And people look at me and they say, you put salt in your lotion. That sounds pretty silly. But in truth, this is a fantastic lotion. People use this as a full body lotion. I know massage therapists that use this. So there's a lot of different kind of applications with it that way.
Really after working out, when I'm doing yoga or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
It's good stuff that way. Right on. So, and this is kind of a brief introduction to these products and to the benefit of Himalayan salt in general. I'm really kind of hoping that I've planted some seeds, because this is something, this lecture could truly go on all night, and I know you guys don't want to stay here all night, but it is something which there's so much benefit from salt, and Himalayan salt has such a rich history. And this has been mined since the time of Alexander the Great. And it was really his horses that led him to it. So the horses get full credit. But this has been mined since then. And there was a time when Himalayan salt was actually worth more than gold. This salt was for royalty alone. And, it's coming out of the mountains the same way that it always has. This company, Evolution Salt, actually manufactures the salt. So we're in complete control from start to finish, bringing it out of the mountain, manufacturing it, and then sending it here, and then bringing it to the stores. And there is a website, evolutionsalt.com, and you can go on there and find all the stuff I'm talking about, a whole lot more info as well. But if you actually want to get these products, the best way to do it is not online, because you got to pay for shipping and everything else. So the best way to get them is to come to a store like this, and see the actual lamp that you want to get and pick it out, and that's the one you're going to take home with you. You know, not get surprised when you get one in the mail, because they're all unique. They're all a little bit different. You know, but it's a better way to get them through the stores that way anyhow. And you can always go online and, you know, call the company and find out where a good store is near you if you're not in here right now. Yeah.
I have a question. The lamps work by heat. Would it be the same as if you have it by a window where the sun gets to it?
Yeah, and you're right, it would be the same. All they have to do is heat up, so it doesn't matter if it's the light bulb or if it's the sunlight coming in. We also have the candle holders. And the candle holders work on the same principle, but of course they're only working, right, if there's a candle burning in it. However, as you mentioned, I keep my candle holder on the windowsill, and all day long that sun is beating down on it, and it's heating up plenty good, so it's generating negative ions. You can also do the same in your car. As it turns out, the car is like a positive ion generator itself. So I mentioned, you know, 1,200 to 1,500 negative ions is the ideal. In the home we're at a couple hundred. Well, in our car we're at like 10. It's pretty rough. You know, so if you can take a chunk of the Himalayan salt and put that somewhere in your car where it's warming up and heating up, you're doing yourself a great justice that way. And as a kind of a side note too, on the topic of you know, these electromagnetic frequencies and the positive ions associated with them, when we're in our car and we're talking on the cell phone, you know, we've got all this electromagnetic frequencies beaming in our bodies and through our bodies. One of the greatest issues with this is that they have no way out. They have no ground. Even as we're walking around, we're insulated with our shoes. We have no ground. If you can go barefoot or hug a tree, you're literally grounding yourself and giving these frequencies a way out. Do a little experiment sometime. When you've got that cell phone headache situation, I know you guys know what I'm talking about. You've been on the thing for 20, 30 minutes and you're like, oh, I gotta go, this hurts. Take your shoes off, put the phone down, walk outside, find a patch of grass, and just make fists with your toes. And just stand there for a few minutes, and I promise you will feel that headache literally just flow through your body and down your feet and out into the ground. It's a very empowering experience to feel that, because you are in control of it. And the hippies did have it right. You know, barefoot, hugging trees is really the way to go. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I'm doing the school research on the topic of salt, and back then in India, Mahatma Gandhi used the salt march.
That's right.
I'm doing the school research on that. And
okay.
Gandhi always would go to the ocean, and they was protesting against the British Empire to flee.
That's right. That assault tax or something, yeah. I believe it was, right? Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm doing the school research.
You know, it is interesting. The more you learn about salt, the more you learn about salt, the more you learn about salt. It never ends. Salt is more wars have been fought over salt than religion. I mean, truly, salt is incredibly important in our culture, and it's really hugely unfortunate that we think of salt and we immediately think of something that's bad for us. You can go to pretty much any other country in the world and mention that salt is bad for you, and they're going to kind of, huh? What are you talking about? It would be like saying water is bad for you. You know, we absolutely 100% need salt tremendously well. The difference is understanding the difference in salt. And once you understand that, and you start to get on a proper salt, then everything else finds its balance that way. So I just want to take one more moment to say thank you guys. This has been a beautiful energy in here, and I'm always really humbled and excited when there's folks that want to learn more for themselves. Yeah.
That's your question. I know about Himalayan sea salt. What's the difference between that and red salt, or red Hawaiian salt? Something I've seen, and it was red.
I have seen the salt from Hawaii. Yeah, yeah, Alea salt. Yeah, you got it.
Is that's supposed to have some health benefits too?
Yeah, that one's really high in iron. The Alea one, I believe, and so
that's probably more the difference between the Himalayan and the.
Well, specifically, the difference would be there you go. Yeah, this is the one that comes out of the from Hawaii, the Alea, I believe it's pronounced. And you know, honestly, I don't know a tremendous amount about it, but I can tell you kind of immediate difference is that This would be considered like a rock salt as opposed to a crystal salt. The minerals in this, I believe, are about 50 or so, whereas this is 84. So you know, I'm not saying this is bad by all means. It's a good salt. As long as you're not doing table salt or, you know, iodized sea salt that looks just like table salt, which has also been heated at over 1,000 degrees, you know, then you're doing yourself good. The reason that I'm talking primarily about Himalayan salt is because it's my belief that it's the ideal. It's probably the very best salt that you're ever going to find. But there's other good salts out there, and this is a good example of one of them, for sure.
Another question for you.
Yeah.
The Himalayan lamp,
Mm-hmm.
when it has the white that forms on it, explain that to me. Is that from the oxygen? Is it wearing? Within 2 years, will the lamp be smaller?
No, it shouldn't be. But what can happen sometimes is that if there's a bulb in there that's not heating up enough, like a 15-watt bulb is what you're looking for. If the bulb in there is not heating it up enough, it's not evaporating all the moisture back out, and then what happens, it starts to collect a little bit and you get little white spots on there like that. So it's always very important to make sure that your lamp, when you touch it after it's been on for a little while, it should be warm. It doesn't have to be super hot, but if it's ice cold, then you know it's not doing the job, and eventually, yeah, you might start to see a little bit of that white buildup. If that happens, just take like a damp rag and kind of wipe it down, and then keep it on to, you know, dry it out again, and that'll do it just fine. Also, you mentioned the difference in the salts here, rock salt versus a crystal salt. There's a fantastic article on the website evolutionsalt.com that will get into great detail about the difference in that. But again, the most important thing is to get off of table salt and understand that that is toxic poison. I mean, the doctors are half right about that. You know, you don't want to be using that. But the other flip side of it is you don't have to use a medication either. You know, salt works. We've, you know, used salt for our entire existence. And so it's something that you just need to know how to use it properly and not go crazy with it. And also I'll mention iodine because the iodized salt often comes up and people want to know, is there iodine in Himalayan salt? And the answer, of course, is yes. It's one of the 84 trace minerals. But I'd just like to make the point that salt is not really a good source of iodine to begin with. I mean, if you're looking for supplemental levels of iodine, look to kelp or other sea vegetables, seaweeds like laver. Dulse is one of my favorites, D-U-L-S-E, and that's got probably the highest concentration of iodine of all of them. And you can get dulse in like a little shaker, you know, and use it on, sprinkle it on your food and stuff. A little teaspoon of that stuff has like 220% of your need of iodine in a day. So I just like to bring that up so people understand that, you know, you don't have to buy that table salt just because it's iodized. The form of iodine that they're putting in there is actually highly controversial as to whether or not it's a good form for us to be putting in our bodies anyways. Any other questions? Well, again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your energy tonight. I hope that I've planted a seed or two, and you have my information, so if you'd like to contact me anytime, please feel free to do that. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, the drawing.
For the lamp.
Yeah, I figured I would kind of cut it off for the recording before